Under the faint hum of the waves crashing beyond the glass walls of the Spencer Beach house, Will sat in silence, staring into the dim reflection of himself in the window. The ocean outside was calm, but there was something in the air, a kind of tension that felt almost electric. He had been alone for only a few hours since Electra left, but already the emptiness of the house was beginning to weigh on him. The scent of her perfume still lingered faintly on the sofa, but his mind was elsewhere, consumed by guilt, exhaustion, and the shadows of his choices. He had spent so long convincing himself that Luna was gone forever, locked away, and unable to haunt him again. Yet beneath that certainty was fear, a deep, persistent dread that she might someday return. And on that Tuesday, November 18th, that fear took form. The sound came first, a soft creak, like the whisper of a memory he had tried to bury. Will turned sharply, his heartbeat quickening. For a moment, he thought the wind had pushed the door ajar, but then a shadow moved in the hallway, slow and deliberate. His throat went dry. Out of that darkness stepped Luna Nozawa, her eyes fierce, her presence ghostly, her very existence defying reason. For a second, he thought he was hallucinating, that guilt and paranoia had finally broken him. But Luna stood there, real and breathing, the pale moonlight from the balcony casting a cold glow on her face. "Luna?" The word caught in his throat, but the shock was too great for sound. He stumbled back, instinctively reaching for his phone, his mind racing. She was supposed to be behind bars. She was supposed to be unreachable. What was she doing here, walking freely into his home like a vision resurrected from the ashes of their chaos? Luna's lips trembled with a strange, almost unhinged joy. She looked thinner than before, her clothes loose, her eyes sunken yet alive with wild determination. She said she had to be creative to find her way back, that she couldn't stay locked away when her heart was still here, with him. She told him that nothing could keep them apart, that the universe itself had given her this second chance. Will felt her words scraping against his nerves like glass. The love she spoke of no longer existed for him. It had been buried under betrayal, fear, and the weight of everything that had gone wrong between them. He wanted to shout, to throw her out, but something about her fragility stopped him. Yet beneath that frailty, he could sense danger. Luna was unpredictable, and the light in her eyes wasn't affection. It was obsession. She believed he still loved her, believed that what they had could be revived, but Will knew the truth. He was done. Every emotion had been drained, replaced by resentment and disgust. Trying to steady his breath, he asked how she managed to escape. Luna only smiled, evasive and serene, as though her freedom was the most natural thing in the world. She whispered that she had friends, that some people still believed in her innocence, that destiny itself had intervened. Her tone was almost mystical, and it frightened him. For a moment, Will considered playing along, feigning sympathy just to keep her calm. He'd done it before, used charm and deception as shields, but this time, something in him refused to play that game again. He was tired of being the manipulator in someone else's fantasy. He wanted it to end, once and for all. But Luna didn't seem to notice his coldness. She kept inching closer, her voice low and fervent. She said Electra didn't matter anymore, that Will could forget her because now Luna was here, and she was free. Will felt his stomach twist. He remembered all too well what Luna was capable of when she believed someone stood between them. He had thought Electra's decision to leave for the office was just coincidence, but now he realized how dangerous it had been to leave him alone. When Luna reached out to touch his arm, Will flinched. That small movement, that reflex of disgust, seemed to break something in her. The light in her eyes darkened. She searched his face for any trace of love, but found only fear. Her breathing became uneven. The silence stretched, thick with tension, until Will spoke, his voice low but sharp. He told her she shouldn't be here, that she needed to go before things got worse. But Luna shook her head violently, her expression twisting into disbelief. She began to plead, then to accuse. She said he had promised her forever. She said Electra had poisoned his heart, that Ivy had turned everyone against her. Her words spiraled into a torrent of pain and confusion. Will could barely follow what she was saying. He realized she wasn't reasoning anymore. She was unraveling right in front of him. He could feel the old manipulative part of himself, the one that once could control any situation, urging him to placate her, to keep her talking until he could call for help. But Luna's presence was too volatile now. He knew that one wrong word could turn this from a confrontation into a catastrophe. So he made a choice, the truth. The cold, cutting truth she would never accept. He told her he didn't love her. Not anymore. That whatever they had was over, dead long before she escaped that cell. For a long, suffocating moment, Luna just stared at him. Then her face hardened. She whispered something about betrayal, about how he would regret abandoning her again. Her tone had changed. It was darker, almost hollow. Will realized then that she had not come for love. She had come to reclaim power. In an instant, she lunged forward, grabbing his wrist as he reached for his phone. Her grip was iron. The desperation in her eyes had transformed into rage. She accused him of lying, of turning her life into ruin, of watching her suffer while he built a new one. Will tried to pull away, but she was stronger than he remembered. The struggle between them felt like a mirror of every fight they had ever had, love twisted into warfare, tenderness poisoned by pride. At last, Will managed to break free and shove her back, his voice shaking as he told her to stop. Luna stumbled, then froze. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then, without warning, she started laughing, a sound so fractured and eerie that it sent chills down his spine. She said he was just like Bill, that betrayal ran in the Spencer bloodline, that maybe she should make him feel what she felt. Her words turned into threats, veiled in longing. It was then Will knew he had no choice. He called out, his voice trembling but resolute, demanding that she leave. When she didn't, he reached for his phone again, this time with the clear intent to call the police, and his father. The name alone, Bill Spencer, seemed to make Luna hesitate. For a moment, the fire in her eyes flickered with fear. She knew what that meant. If Bill got involved, there would be no escape, no sympathy, no chance to explain herself. The Spencer patriarch was ruthless, and Luna's actions would be treated as an act of war. Her breathing quickened. The tension in the air snapped like a wire stretched too far. She whispered that he was making a mistake, that he would regret turning her in, but Will stood his ground. It was the first time he had truly defied her without hesitation. And in that defiance, Luna saw the final truth. He was lost to her forever. The spell broke. With a sudden, frantic motion, she turned and ran toward the door. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, followed by the slam of the front door as she disappeared into the night. Will stood there, frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt no triumph, no relief, only a deep, hollow ache. Outside, the ocean roared louder, as though mocking him. He finally sank into the couch, his body trembling, his mind racing through every possible outcome. He knew she wouldn't go far. Luna was too consumed by her need for control, too addicted to the chaos they created together. She would return, unless someone stopped her first. Meanwhile, across town at Forrester Creations, Elektra and Ivy were in the middle of a tense morning meeting when everything changed. The conversation had been light at first, centered on new designs and upcoming campaigns, but when Elektra mentioned Luna, almost casually, as a shadow in the rearview mirror, her phone began to ring. The ringtone cut sharply through the air. She answered, expecting a routine call from security, but her face drained of color within seconds. Ivy watched as her friend's hand began to shake. Luna had escaped. The words hung in the room like a death sentence. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Elektra whispered that she knew where Luna would go, straight to Will. Her voice was laced with panic, guilt, and dread. She grabbed her coat and rushed for the door, Ivy following close behind, both of them knowing they were already too late. Back at the beach house, Will stood in silence, the phone still in his hand. He had called the police, but his voice had sounded distant, detached, as though the reality of what had happened hadn't yet sunk in. When he hung up, he walked to the window and stared at the ocean again. The moonlight shimmered on the surface of the water, calm and deceptive, hiding the turbulence beneath. The sirens came faintly at first, carried on the wind. He didn't move. Somewhere out there, Luna was running, through the dunes, through the dark streets, through the labyrinth of her own fractured mind. And though Will had done what he thought was right, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that he had just unleashed something far worse. At Forrester Creations, chaos erupted as news spread of the prison lockdown and Luna's bold escape. Designers, models, and executives whispered in fear and fascination. Elektra tried to keep control, issuing orders, demanding updates, but her composure cracked every time she thought of Will alone in that house. Ivy stood beside her, steady but visibly shaken. Both women knew Luna's obsession wasn't just about love, it was about vengeance. By the time they reached the beach house, the flashing lights of police cars reflected against the windows. Officers moved in and out, questioning Will, securing the area. He stood on the porch, pale and silent, his eyes fixed on the horizon. When Elektra ran to him, relief flickered across his face, but it quickly turned into something else, shame. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. As the night stretched on, Luna vanished into the darkness, leaving only footprints on the sand that the tide soon erased. The world around them moved on, police reports, news headlines, Forrester gossip, but those who knew her felt a chill that wouldn't fade. Because Luna wasn't the kind of ghost that disappeared quietly. She was the kind that lingered, unseen but always near, waiting for her chance to strike again. And in the end, as dawn crept over Los Angeles, Will watched the sun rise over the water and wondered if this was freedom or just another prison, one made of guilt, silence, and the haunting memory of the woman he could never truly escape. The world would see her as a fugitive, a danger to society, but for Will, Luna was something far more terrifying, a reflection of every mistake he had ever made, walking, breathing, and still out there somewhere beneath the same morning sky. The ocean roared beneath the cliff that had come to symbolize everything Luna Nozawa was running from, the past, the prison, and the people who had turned her life into a storm. The November fog hung heavy, a living thing that blurred the edges of the world until all that remained was the shimmer of white foam far below and the echo of her name carried on the wind. Somewhere behind her, sirens screamed and voices called out, but Luna's heartbeat drowned them all. Her body trembled from exhaustion and fear, yet there was defiance in her eyes, the kind of madness born from desperation. She had escaped because she believed she still had something left to fight for, but as the darkness thickened around her, that belief began to crumble. For days, Luna had been moving like a ghost through the coastlines near the Spencer Beach house, hiding among shadows, sustained by adrenaline and fragments of memory. She had thought freedom would feel lighter than this, that breaking out of those cold prison walls would be a rebirth. Instead, it felt like the ocean itself had followed her, dragging her down with invisible hands. The world she once knew had closed its doors. Elektra had abandoned her, Will had betrayed her, and even her mother Poppy had chosen silence. All she had left was the relentless will to survive, but survival had a cost. Every step she took toward the edge of that cliff was one more she couldn't take back. Somewhere not far behind, Lee Finnegan's voice cut through the fog. "Luna, please stop this." The plea carried both anger and sorrow, but Luna didn't turn back. Her mind flashed through every humiliation, every betrayal. The nights in the cell when she dreamed of the waves swallowing her whole, the endless replay of Will's rejection, and the bitter truth that no one believed she could be redeemed. The only thing she wanted now was control, to decide her fate before the world decided it for her. Lee's voice grew closer, pleading for her to surrender, to end this chase before it destroyed her. But surrender meant returning to chains, to the slow death of confinement, and Luna could not bear that. She whispered to herself that freedom was worth any price, even if it came wrapped in danger. Her shoes slipped on the wet stones as she edged closer to the cliff. The mist swallowed her figure, blurring her outline until she looked like a dream about to vanish. Down below, the Pacific churned, dark and merciless. The sound of it was almost hypnotic, the deep, rhythmic pull that seemed to promise peace. Luna's tears mixed with the salt air. She thought of the baby inside her, fragile and unformed, a life caught in the storm of her choices. There was a moment, a heartbeat of hesitation, when she wondered if she could find another way. But then she saw movement behind the fog, a figure approaching. Poppy. Her mother's presence should have brought comfort, but instead it sent a chill through her spine. Poppy Nozawa's expression was unreadable, her voice calm but sharp. She told Luna to step away from the edge, that this madness had gone too far. But in her eyes there was something else. Fear, calculation, maybe even guilt. Luna suddenly realized that her mother wasn't here to save her. She was here to contain her. "Don't you see, Mother?" Luna's voice cracked, barely louder than the wind. "They all want me gone." Poppy reached out, her hand trembling, her voice soft. "You've made mistakes, but we can fix this." But Luna saw something flicker behind her mother's composure, a kind of resignation that made her blood run cold. The thought came unbidden. What if her mother believed the world was better off without her? What if the woman who had given her life was about to take it away? The rocks beneath Luna's feet shifted. She stumbled back, her arms flailing to keep balance, and in that brief, heart-stopping instant, Poppy lunged forward. Whether it was a desperate attempt to save her or a moment of fatal calculation, no one would ever know. Their hands met, one trying to hold on, the other trying to pull away, and the world seemed to slow. Luna's scream cut through the fog as her body pitched backward, vanishing into the mist. The ocean received her like a grave. For a moment, there was silence. Then chaos erupted above, Lee shouting for help, Poppy falling to her knees, the distant wail of sirens echoing through the cliffs. The story spread fast. The escaped convict, the pregnant woman, the tragic fall into the Pacific. News crews swarmed the coastline, helicopters hovered above the waves, and divers searched for days, but the sea gave nothing back. There was no body, no trace, just a single torn piece of fabric tangled in the rocks like a cruel memento. The world mourned and moved on, as it always did. Katie Logan, who had once cursed Luna's name, whispered to Bill that maybe she had gotten what she deserved, though even she couldn't hide the shiver that ran through her at the thought of that fog-covered cliff. Electra Forrester tried to appear indifferent, insisting that Luna's death was inevitable, but in private she couldn't stop replaying the night before the fall. The argument, the guilt, the fear that she had somehow pushed Luna toward the edge. Will Spencer, meanwhile, stared at the ocean for hours on end, haunted by the face that kept appearing in his dreams. Yet beneath all the grief and speculation, something refused to settle. The currents around that stretch of coast were unpredictable, notorious for sweeping bodies far out to sea. Some said the tide had claimed Luna. Others whispered that she had been saved, pulled onto a passing fishing vessel or hidden by someone who wanted her alive. The police found no definitive proof either way. Officially, Luna Nozawa was declared dead. But in the world of the bold and the beautiful, dead rarely meant gone. Weeks passed, and the waves washed away the footprints of that night, but they could not erase the unease that lingered in those who had known her. Lee felt it most, the guilt of a doctor who had failed to save her, and perhaps the shame of knowing she had hesitated when it mattered. She dreamed often of the cliff, of Luna's hand reaching out through the fog, of her own voice calling out too late. And sometimes, in those dreams, she heard another sound, faint, like a heartbeat beneath the sea. Then came the rumors. A fisherman claimed he had seen a woman on the northern shore, drenched and disoriented, with eyes that burned like wildfire. Another said he had found footprints in the sand days after the search ended. The authorities dismissed it as nonsense, but whispers spread like wildfire through Los Angeles. Poppy became withdrawn, refusing to speak about that night. Every time someone mentioned Luna's name, her hands would tremble. Behind closed doors, the Forrester mansion was no less haunted. Electra began to unravel, plagued by guilt and paranoia. She started hearing things, the sound of footsteps outside her window, the faint melody of Luna's laughter in the wind. Ivy tried to console her, but even she couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something was watching them. Will, meanwhile, tried to drown his thoughts in work, in meaningless parties and empty faces, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw Luna falling, and every time he woke, he felt as if she were still falling somewhere just out of reach. It was around this time that a letter appeared. No one knew where it came from, no return address, no handwriting they could recognize. It arrived at Spencer Publications, slipped between the pages of a business report. Inside was a single line written in black ink: "You can't bury what the sea keeps." Will read it again and again, his hands shaking. He didn't tell anyone about it, not even Bill. But that night, he drove to the cliff alone. The fog was thick again, just like before, and for a moment he thought he saw her, a figure in white, standing at the edge. He blinked, and she was gone. Yet when he turned to leave, he found something at his feet, a seashell tied with a strip of fabric, the same kind that had been recovered from the rocks after her supposed death. By now, the mystery of Luna's disappearance had taken on a life of its own. Some said she had died, others swore she had survived. But one thing was certain: her shadow still loomed over everyone who had betrayed her. Electra's career began to falter as scandal followed her like a curse. Katie's unease grew until she started to believe Luna's spirit was punishing her for her cruelty. And Poppy, once graceful and composed, began to crumble under the weight of her secret. Because Poppy knew the truth. She had seen Luna fall, yes, but she had also seen the hand that reached up from the water before the waves took her. In her heart, she knew her daughter had not died that night. She had escaped, again. But from what, and into what, Poppy dared not imagine. Months later, when spring came to Los Angeles, the sea delivered its final message. A boat washed ashore near Malibu, empty, but for a single item left on the deck: a hospital bracelet bearing Luna Nozawa's name. The discovery reignited everything: the investigations, the rumors, the fear. Bill Spencer hired private investigators, Electra became the subject of headlines, and Lee was summoned for questioning about what she might have known. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise died down. People stopped asking questions. Life returned to its deceptive normalcy until one quiet evening when the doors of Forrester Creations opened and a woman stepped inside. Her hair was darker now, her skin paler, her eyes colder. She moved like someone who had been remade by the sea itself, patient, deliberate, unstoppable. The receptionist froze, unable to speak. The woman smiled faintly and said she was here to see Electra Forrester. When Electra arrived, her face turned white. Luna stood before her, alive, silent, unblinking. The air between them felt charged, heavy with all the words that had never been spoken. And as Luna's gaze drifted to the design sketches scattered across the table, something like amusement flickered in her eyes. "I told you," she whispered at last, her voice calm but edged with something dangerous. "You can't bury what the sea keeps." And in that moment, every rumor, every fear, every unspoken sin came crashing back. Luna Nozawa had returned, not as a ghost, but as a reckoning. What had begun as an accident on a fog-covered cliff had become something far more terrifying, a resurrection with purpose. Her fall had been real. Her survival had been brutal. But her vengeance was only beginning.
Oh,